the most satisfying sale you made during your whole career? What was the toughest selling situation that you got into where it was sort of, really up against competition selling the same customer? What was an example of a major problem you've confronted in on? What's the most innovative thing that you brought to your work as a sales consultant? What did you do differently in that job that other sales consultants didn't do? Looking back over your career at Xerox, where did you get your biggest kicks? You mentioned that you were dealing with higher level executives and things which I could certainly understand there. How did that differ? Could you compare your selling to those people with selling to the other people? There are few aspects of the pharmaceutical salesperson's job about which you should be aware. We know about most of them. But most of our sales positions require some travel. You might have to be away from home 2 or 3 nights a week. What problems would this cause?
I travel now, and I don't think it would be any different. No objection to that whatsoever.
Just as we can't tell you in advance how much travel you might be doing, we can't tell you what part of the country in which you might live. It depends on what territory opens up. Is there any part of the country which would be more preferable than another for you to live?
Not particularly. I've moved several times before, and I don't think that that's going to bother me. I don't have any children, and my wife doesn't work.
Another feature about the job with which you should be aware is that because physicians are sometimes hard to get hold of during the day, we have to see them at night. Would this evening work interfere with any of your activities?
Well, my only real hobby is boating, and so I don't think it would be much problem working at night as long as it wasn't too much of it.
I did find a few more questions for you. I didn't ask you any questions about the time you were in the Army Reserves. I see you were there for 6 years. Did you have any experience that would relate to your performance as a salesperson at ABC?
None at all. I was a teletypewriter operator, and other than being able to operate a typewriter, nothing I can think of.
You've really been terrific in giving me information about yourself. I'd like to ask you a question where I'll give you a little bit more time to think of the answer. I know you've worked for lots of different kinds of managers as a salesperson. What particular manager did you work with best, and why? I'd like you to think about that because it's not an easy answer. And I'm going to look over my notes at the same time, and I'll come back to you for the answer. Okay?
Okay.
All right, what's your answer?
Well, I'd have to say it would be the manager. I left the major account and went into the consulting area of Xerox.
Tell me about that. What's the difference?
Well, the difference is that in consulting, you're really not in direct sales as much as you are going in and doing an analysis of paper flow and people's demand for various types of equipment and how they were utilizing the equipment that they had, and employed a number of industrial engineering techniques.
What did you do differently than a salesman?
Well, it was not really selling as such, as much as it was providing a good statistical summary and basis of justifying equipment or justifying additional equipment or different usage of the same equipment. But the main thrust of it was to increase our share of the marketplace, really, in a given account or any place for that matter.
Is there considerable more technical expertise needed in this job than the others?
Yeah, I'd say from the standpoint of understanding the various computer programs that we utilized, from understanding the industrial engineering techniques that we used to determine demand and how utilization was taking place.
Could you give me an example of one of the studies you made as a sales consultant?
The process itself involves going in after presenting the study and getting agreement for that, identifying the various pieces of equipment to be surveyed, and utilizing simple recording techniques. We would record the location of where the people came from and what their demand was for that equipment. Okay? We would take and put all this data into a computer, utilizing industrial engineering techniques. We would determine how far people are coming to make their copies, how much time they're spending making the copies, and there were other little things that we could plug in there, such as actually what the copies were. The object of which was to find out, or I should say determine their utilization of the equipment, to see if they were doing things the best or the optimum way for the money that they wanted to spend and for the demands that they had on the equipment.
Can you give me an example of a specific study that you were involved in as a sales consultant, and sort of take me through what you did for an actual client from the beginning to end?
Okay. Let's take the county of Allegheny as the downtown complex of the county office buildings, of which there were 5 or 6. Of course, the study was presented, let's say the idea of a study was presented and accepted by the people, which required some explanation initially. Then we set about to gather the statistical information by placing certain recording documents at each user location of copiers and of the various types of printing presses and other pieces of equipment that produced the paper flow of the county. The object there was, from our standpoint, to replace the competitive equipment that was in there. Now, by gathering all this information from each of the copying locations, which indicates where the demand is coming from and what the demand constitutes in terms of how are they utilizing each piece of equipment. In addition to that, we would determine, through the use of the computer program and using industrial engineering techniques, we would determine how far these people are coming, how much time actually they're spending literally walking to and from the machine, standing in front, let's say, waiting to use the machine, and so forth. The object there was to get a complete, total picture of how they were utilizing their various pieces of graphic equipment. We took all the data, put it together, analyzed it, and our first step was to present that exact picture to them, what they're doing. Now, obviously, in many instances, we found pieces of equipment that were being underutilized. Many of the pieces of equipment were being overutilized, and several were being used in the wrong ways. So our recommendation, therefore, was to replace most of this competitive equipment, where feasible, with Xerox equipment, and at the same time, recommend specific locations to reduce the amount of time people spent making the copies. And so we served 2 purposes. One was to reduce their overall cost by reducing their labor, and hopefully by consolidation to reduce their direct cost of the copying equipment.
When you would go into another company, what would be the difference in approach to any other company with whom you worked and the one you did for Allegheny County?
Unless the company had a specific reason for wanting a study done, okay, so to evaluate that what we're doing, our approach was always the same.
Okay.
But ahead of time, we would agree on what objectives we wanted to accomplish. Perhaps they weren't concerned about how much time people were spending making copies, and we call it a copy break. Okay? So unless they had something specific, we always used to go with just a general approach because our programming was set up to give us that information if we plugged it in.
Okay. Then how different were the outputs that came out of your study?
Well, that would depend an awful lot on the type of equipment that the people were utilizing. If they had a big piece of equipment that was capable of doing many things, then your demand would be a lot. You might, by the same token, have a bunch of very, very small pieces of equipment that are just used for 1 and 2 copies, very low demand type of work. So your study would vary from that standpoint.
How do you get your customers there, and how you go about selling?
Well, in this particular instance, the states had never been covered very well, so I got a hold of the industrial directories that the Chamber of Commerce puts out, and went down using the standard industrial classification or code, or SIC code is what it's called, and got a list of those people that potentially could use urethane foam, some of which already did, and then I proceeded to call on them.
What kind of success have you had here?
Good success.
Can you be more specific?
Well, we started out with a territory that was doing about $500,000, and in about 7 months I had it billing about $750,000. And so,
how do you do that?
Well, most of it came from the sale of one major account, which I managed to wrest away from one of my competitors.
How?
Sir?
How?
Well, it started off by calling on the people, finding out what problems they had, and there were several that they had. And we got their plant manager to visit our laboratories in New Haven, and I got an opportunity to show him a piece of our equipment, and then recommended that he let us give him a demonstration at his plant. So we proceeded to give him that demonstration, and he liked what he saw, the simplicity of our outfit and so forth, and the service that we had to offer. And at that point, once again, since it was a major $300,000-400,000 decision, they had to get it all approved, so we had to do what we call an economic analysis, which is nothing more than a comparison of the way we recommend doing it as opposed to our customers or our competitors, and showing a certain amount of labor savings in lost materials and things of this nature.
Okay. You say we. Who else is involved?
Well, I guess I always speak of we, because speaking of I is not
right, I understand.
something I try to keep away from.
Okay.
So actually I did most of it.
So how many sales have you made?
I'd say about 6 and about 1 a month.
What about post-college training? That non-job, it's training besides what Xerox would send you to be a better salesperson. Have you done anything on your own?
No.
How about books or things you might have read?
Oh, I read lots of books, lots of the management type books.
Which ones?
Oh, Peter Principle, Peter Drucker's books. And,
which ones?
Management Grid, I believe, was one of them. And there was one other I've read so many of them, and it's been quite a while since I've done it. Psycho-cybernetics.
Salesmen sometimes have occasion to bend the truth a little to make a sale. Have you ever had occasion to do that?
Well, I don't think I'd ever misrepresent a product that I was selling. I think there are instances where a customer may have certain misconceptions which are really harmless to him. And there have been times when I have utilized those misconceptions to my advantage by just simply not correcting that, since it was harmless to him, but it's about the extent of it.
What would be an example?
Well, recently in this particular urethanes business that I'm in now, I was calling on a gentleman who was using a competitive product, and he was not mixing it properly, and therefore
Can you tell me another example?
I think perhaps once or twice in Xerox where there were people that were under the misimpression, if you will, that they were saving money or losing money on a particular process, and that it was possible that we could save them money by not improving upon something which all I'm doing is improving my competitor's business. I would more or less...
Any other examples?
I can't think of any right offhand.
Did you bring any new ideas to the job?
No.
Well, I can understand that. It's your first job.
Yeah.
Yeah, what did you make in chemistry? Do you remember? I'd have a hard time remembering too, but...
Yes, very poorly. I did very poorly. I think I got a D both semesters,
Okay.
but I did pass.
Right. Well, it wasn't very easy for me either.
No.
So you kept a pencil handy in your car, sort of.
That's right.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What kind of success did you have there?
I would have to say...
Why did you leave the company?
I got fired.
You were fired?
It was a kind of a general cutback in the sales force, and I was the newest man on the block, if you will, and got cut back.
Was it related to performance?
I don't think so, particularly. I turned in a rather large order the day I was fired.
Must have been a surprise to you then.
Very much so. I was quite shocked.
I bet. How did you react to it?
Well, I didn't react very, very well to it, really. I just plain shocked and upset. I thought I was doing a good job. It was rather abrupt.
You were sort of upset about the suddenness of it.
Yes, plus the fact that I just turned in this big order, which I was pretty proud of, and obviously never got to see it delivered, and didn't really think I should have been fired, but I don't think that I think they chose their management people more on the basis of what sales success they had than their abilities to manage other people.
You were unhappy with the caliber of managers?
I wouldn't say that I was unhappy with the caliber. I think I just got tired of it. Now, that might seem to be a play on words.